Roger Gamblin had spent more than 2 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars in his obsession to find out what happened to his best friend, Jimmy Trindade. But federal investigators and his best friend's family thought Roger's son, Chris, knew more than he was saying about Jimmy's disappearance. The whole story was doubly hurtful, according to Roger's attorney, Richard Lubin.
It broke his heart that Jim was gone, and it broke his heart that anybody would think that his son had anything to do with it.
And then in June 2008, 2.5 years after Jimmy Trindade went missing, this strange story got even stranger. Roger Gamblin didn't show up for work one day. Calls to his phone and knocks on his door went unanswered. It appeared Roger, the wealthy businessman and fixture in the Palm Beach real estate world, had just disappeared along with his wife. Palm Beach Post editor Jan Tuckwood.
So now everybody's speculating yet. Are these disappearances related? Does Roger know where Jim is somewhere? And I mean, it opens up a whole other Pandora's box of speculation. Who knows?
Had Roger met the same fate as Jimmy, or had the two best friends plotted all along to meet later in some tropical paradise? And did Roger perhaps take with him the secret of Jimmy's disappearance? Within days, the answers became pretty clear. Roger's disappearance had nothing to do with Jimmy's. The FBI was investigating funds missing from his title company, and before he could be arrested, Roger took some of the money and ran.
Upson disappears one day, takes the money from his business, and he's gone.
While the allegation was that Roger had stolen $10 million from escrow accounts, it appeared he spent a lot of it paying for the Bahamian parties, the Miami Vice boats, and later his son's legal bills, as well as the search for Jimmy. And when the real estate bubble burst, Roger couldn't repay the accounts. Roger and Peggy Gamblin were indicted for mail and wire fraud as well as conspiracy. The FBI learned they were last seen on a private jet headed to Texas, where Roger has family. From there, the trail went cold. After a while, relatives assumed Roger, who suffered from heart problems, had died.
Earlier today, a judge heard from some of the people the Gamblins allegedly stole from.
Meanwhile, creditors and homeowners who lost escrow money to Roger went to court to get it back.
It did take a big hit on me and my family.
For 2.5 years, there was no sign of Roger and Peggy, but that was about to change far away from Florida in the Colorado Rockies. In the mountains outside Durango, Colorado, a couple named Ron and Nancy Jenner showed up and rented a cabin. They made home improvements, including 12 surveillance cameras and 6 motion detectors. According to the cabin's owner, they said they were afraid of bears.
They had so many surveillance cameras around that as soon as you entered the driveway, they knew you were coming, and he would be out here to greet you before you could get to the house.
They got to know some of the locals down at the Shank House Bar and Grill. Nancy was quickly known by the nickname Red. Ron was too sickly to work, but Nancy picked up some odd jobs.
She worked as a cleaning lady, cleaning cabins up here.
She also worked at this convenience store.
She hard working.
Last December, Ron Jenner went to a Durango hospital with heart problems. He had a defibrillator, which is encoded with patient information. After a routine scan, doctors were puzzled why the device showed a different name and not Ron Jenner. In what may be a first for how fugitives get caught, hospital lawyers Googled the name that appeared on the medical device, wondering why a patient would lie about his identity. The name on the device was Roger Gamblin, and Gamblin was a fugitive. 2 days later, the FBI arrested Roger and his wife Peggy as he was released from the hospital.
You can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't make that stuff up.
While the Gamblins were under indictment and charged with stealing millions, it's unclear how much of that they still had. Roger looked pretty scruffy with his gray beard, and the month before they were arrested, Peggy asked their landlord if they could pay the rent late. Roger and Peggy Gamblin were sent back to Florida and held without bond. Now, with Roger in custody, Patrick Trindade saw an opportunity. He hoped Roger knew more about his brother's disappearance and might tell all to avoid possible prison time.
It gave me a flicker of hope that perhaps we would find out more rather than him face the rest of his life in prison. He had spent all this time, apparently in my eyes, protecting Chris. I didn't think he would really stop now.
Breaking news tonight, a once high-powered businessman accused of fraud and conspiracy has died today while in federal custody.
Like Patrick Trindade's hopes, Roger Gamblin didn't live long. 1 month after his arrest, he died in custody from heart failure. His wife Peggy recently entered a plea deal to a lesser charge of covering up Roger's crimes and faces 3 years in jail when sentenced. The case of Jimmy's disappearance, while still open, seems dead too. Just recently, the lead agent, Don Guthrie, retired from the Department of Homeland Security.
How much did it hurt your investigation that you didn't get started until 10 months after Jimmy Trindade disappeared?
Oh, it affected it in a huge way.
Do you think had you gotten onto this right away,
yes,
we'd have suspects in custody?
I think so.
For Jimmy's daughter, Taylor, the pain continues in unexpected ways. Although she stopped talking to Chris Gamblin long ago, recently she received 2 text messages from him.
What was the first text?
Stating that he loved my dad and that he promised his dad that he would find out what happened.
So how did you react to that?
I just blew it off.
And literally just days before this interview, Chris texted you again.
Yeah. He asked me if I got the same phone call as he did and that he heard that Jimmy's going to be to the U.S. soon.
What do you think the purpose of that was?
I don't know if it was a hurtful text or it was him just trying to cover up something. I don't know if it was just on his mind or what was going through his head.
Chris Gamblin seems to believe Jimmy is still alive, even though he signed an affidavit 6 months after Jimmy's disappearance saying he believed Jimmy died at sea. Chris declined requests for an interview with Dateline, but in an email wrote that he wanted, quote, to move on and start over with my life. I do want to pray for healing and reconciliation for everyone. I pray they find Jimmy as well.
What's been the hardest part of this for you?
I just want my dad back. I just wish he was around. I just graduated last year. He wasn't there for my graduation. It's just hard.
Taylor Trindade, now 19, has spent a quarter of her life without her father, but she still finds solace in the things that made him happy. The smell of the ocean, the salt spray, and the wind on her face.
To the ocean, it reminds me of him, so it's kind of a peaceful place. And some of my friends have boats, so I'll go out fishing and stuff, and it reminds me of him, and it kind of puts me in a happy place.